Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Well, I'm delighted to be able to welcome to the podcast John Fletcher, Russell Earnshaw. Russell, welcome back. John, this is your first time on the podcast formally, even though we've been talking about doing this for some time. So you two guys are AKA the Magic Academy. Welcome to the Talent Equation.
Thank you very much.
Hey mate, thanks, appreciate it.
Great to have you on board. I mean, there's an awful lot of exciting things happening out there. I mean, I've just literally seen, the Magic Academy has gone from being kind of like a relatively, I guess, almost like an underground guerrilla movement of coaches who dare to talk about player-centeredness and different approaches to creating an experience for young people to develop in rugby to a much bigger community. And now actually almost, you're moving into a bigger direction and you guys are now doing some very, very exciting things across a lot of different sports. The starting point might be, let's just talk a little bit about Magic Academy and what you're trying to do with it and where it's going, and then we can start to jump into all the other subjects.
I'll take that. Actually, two words that we did use when we started it out were underground and guerrilla. We want to have an NGB badge on it. We actually wanted it to feel a little bit naughty. So people didn't know about it. And then that's essentially how it started out, and now it's grown into 2,500 people. Many of them are coaches around the world, parents, some kids on it as well, keeping the grown-ups sane, cross-sport. I still think I had an email the other day from a football coach in Costa Rica, and I still think he thought it was an underground guerrilla movement. So it was quite a furtive email, which I enjoyed. I think it's grown a lot. We just, as we were just chatting about, we went to a Magic Academy meet last night in Yatton, organised by John O'Connor, who's a coach on there. We had an ice cream van, which is now on my rider at every single coach development thing I do. Burgers, coaches on the pitch, off the pitch, sharing problems, sharing solutions, but organised by the people on Magic. So nothing to do with us really. Just that's where we hoped it would go. That people would start to take control of their own development and get excited about coaching and excited about creating really cool environments for kids. And now I guess we're where we are.
And so, John, from your perspective, I know the kind of sky's the limit, and actually one of the challenges that you're probably facing is actually narrowing down all the opportunities and scoping out kind of, if you like, what the possibilities are for the Magic Academy. But broadly, kind of what are you guys trying to achieve with the Academy now, and what's the sort of future direction?
Yeah, there would be a couple of things. One is better coaching and coaches. Probably explain a little bit as we go through this what better would look like, and very much with the players in mind. So my first point is how can we ensure that players across all sports have a much more positive and effective experience, and with that you would look straight away to environment. At the centre of all environment would be the coach and coaching. So that's kind of where we're coming from. You're absolutely right. If we're not careful, we're going to need a lot more hours and a lot more days. It is initially, or what we're going to start out is definitely a big priority is around the coach sharing. So it's around the opportunity for coaches to come and share information. They'll get some content from myself and Rusty and other wizards, so other people who are, let's call them experts, across a number of areas. So some key areas that we want to, or we're considering at this moment in time, number one would be the environment, so the learning environment. What does that look like? What could it look like? How can we share some information around there? The craft of coaching. What are the skills needed of a coach? And then getting into the initial one will have a bias towards rugby, so the actual content of the sport. So rugby, the technical, tactical, as lots of people would call it, the physical and the behavioural stuff. So that's actually the framework. In addition to that, an opportunity for coaches to share stories. So similar to what Talent Equation, podcasts, videos, bloggy type stuff. Some people who have done some stuff, had some interesting things to share. How can we make that accessible to coaches? Just before we start, so Rusty and Fletch get a lot of. There is actually a third person. So we have the Magic Stig, somebody who can't be identified for a number of reasons. He's definitely the brains behind the. So this is a guy that gets stuff done. So me and Rusty we're clearly the face. What's happened at the RFU has allowed us to be. Allowed us to do this. However, there is a third person. So the Magic Stig, he may at some point be revealed. We'll have to wait and see what that looks like.
To be fair, without the Magic Stig, everything would just be a concept to me, I think. So there would be stuff in my brain. So the challenge cards, which I'm sure you've seen on Twitter, would still be in my brain or written down on a list, a piece of paper somewhere. So we've definitely got someone who's making stuff happen.
Yeah, I've got to admit. So, just as a bit of backstory, I'm obviously very fortunate to be able to have called you guys colleagues for a number of times at my time at the RFU, and I know we had some good, healthy, robust conversations about various things happening within sport and in the landscape. And one of the things that's interesting about that, though, from my perspective, is when I saw you guys had sort of produced those challenge cards. Knowing you both, I thought to myself, wow, these guys have got themselves really organised. That's interesting.
It's just an illusion.
It's definitely an illusion. I mean, there's definitely, and again, the Magic Stig needs a big shout out because he is, as Rusty's already alluded to, he's the guy that's getting stuff done. He's getting thoughts and ideas and stuff, and he's actually making it happen. I've given it away a little bit there on the sex of the Magic Stig. That's the only clue.
Okay. So actually, as a starting point, there's something I probably... Rusty's been on before, and the audience got to know a little bit about Rusty's backstory, but Fletch, not everybody probably knows... I obviously know of you, and everybody I know who live in this bubble of mine would know of you and all that sort of stuff. But there may be people who listen to the podcast who don't know your backstory. So it might just be worth introducing a little bit of that in terms of, what your journey has been in this world of coaching and coach development.
I'll try to do as quick as I can. It's relatively unspectacular. Born and bred in Northumberland. Really proud of where I'm from. Mad keen on sport always. Played a number of sports. Ironically, didn't play rugby till fairly late into my teens. So played a lot of football. Played a lot of different sports. Really enthused by sport and coaches. I was really fortunate. I probably only had a couple of poor experiences. They were probably towards when I got into performance sport. So all of my coaches who supported me across a number of sports were really nice. They were really kind. They afforded me lots of really great opportunities. I think that's been really helpful in terms of how I've positioned myself as a coach. Wasn't engaged by school, perfectly honest. Really keen to leave. Really keen to get out and start working. Happened to be pretty good at rugby. Had some opportunities to play. Got a pretty nasty injury fairly young. I can remember lying in a hospital bed thinking, probably not going to work out as a player as the game went professional. However, there was almost a light bulb moment. Clearly, if there's players who are getting paid, they're going to need coaches. So from that moment, in that bed, with a pretty sore leg, I decided to be a professional coach, basically. And now my journey, I think, has been a good one. So I worked in development first. In rugby, that job allowed me to get into a lot of things: coach development, player development, social inclusion type programs, coaching men, women, kids with learning difficulties, disabled, etc., etc. and then I moved into an academy environment in Newcastle Falcons. I was really fortunate at that time. Lots of good players were in the area. I would get credited with a lot. Lots of those players went on to do amazing things. Hopefully I felt as I supported them. However, there was probably some good fortune in that. They were really, really good players, really, really good people. I got some opportunities then at the first team. Enjoyed that experience. Didn't necessarily enjoy what I then got into. England came around a role within their performance program. Really excited about that. Worked there for 10 years until recently. That's afforded me lots of opportunities to meet some amazing people, get into some really good environments. And that's kind of the journey, really. The interesting bit is the people you meet along the way. Being inspired by a number of people definitely shifted and changed me, nudged me a bit. And I continue to do that, so that the last 3 or 4 things I've done have definitely also helped shape me. So that's it.
One of the fascinating things about the time working with you guys was, you were both sort of operating in a different department. So you were both in the performance department, looking at, the kind of talent system, talent pathway, all that sort of stuff. You, Fletch, obviously heading up the under-18s program and then supporting some of the stuff with the 20s, and Rusty, you've been heavily involved in that. What was always fascinating to me is I'm working in development, looking at, kind of grassroots stuff and some aspects of the talent system. The early stages, the 13, 14, 15-year-olds. But the conversations we used to have, you guys were as passionate about under 8s, under 9s, under 10 mini rugby as you were about what was happening at the under 18s, because you saw the direct connection between what happens in those early stages with young people and then the end product that you're receiving kind of at the 18s level, and this, that, and the other. And we used to have some really good, great conversations about that kind of stuff. But I would say that that's not always, I don't necessarily have those kinds of conversations when I speak to people in the performance context. They tend to think about the performance context and they're less interested in the developmental stuff unless they're under pressure, in which case they blame the developmental system for all the failings that they have at the national level. But you guys had a genuine passion for that. So connecting those two things, I think, is quite an interesting thing. And I'm just interested on your reflections around, how you view, say, that community grassroots space and the connection with the sort of talent system.
Yeah, I think that would be a legacy I'd be very proud of. I think we should all be very proud of, and certainly people in the development department. Guys like Nick Scott and Kenzie and Webby have been instrumental in that as well, just connecting the whole game up. The players that play for England, the players that play for universities, the players that play in any environment all often started off lower down in club rugby. And we would now be passionate about kids having good experiences. I think becoming a father definitely impacts upon that. You would want your kids to have some awesome learning experiences. And ultimately, looking at it from a selfish point of view, when you're coaching England 18s, then you want skillful, adaptable players, and that starts young. So we can really quickly constrain kids' skill and their adaptability by, lots of the stuff we would chat about, by telling them they can only play one sport, by putting them in a certain position, by sitting them on a bench, by making them fearful of mistakes so that they actually don't go and explore stuff and get better. So the whole thing's connected up. For me, it should just be one big rugby family.
And I think that would be probably true, I think, in many sports. I genuinely, as I go around there, I do see this almost big separation between performance and development, and it's almost like they're two separate worlds. And the problem is that the human beings who are involved in the system, it's not like two separate worlds to them. In reality, it's actually, they're just on some sort of developmental journey, and at some point these things shift. But I often see philosophical tension between performance and development. Development often is there saying, look, we need more people, we want to retain, we want to do this, and performance is often coming in there saying, no, actually we want quality. And if the byproduct of the quality is actually we lose loads of players from the sport, then so be it. And that, I think, is something that sports, I think, struggle to resolve. But what is their core? What is their philosophy? What is their approach? So at the very development, actually, and you both, heavily involved in this project, the creation of the kind of cards idea was a way, I think, wasn't it, to try and galvanize the organization into saying, look, what is important to us about the way we develop players at every level? I mean, that's really grabbed hold, hasn't it? It'd be interesting just to get your reflections on that as a legacy, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, it has. And again, I think you need to give a shout out to Stuart Lancaster. He was a key part of that. So he had a big, and continues to have that one game approach. He definitely wanted the England team to connect better with the game. Cards actually came from conversations with him and his management team at that point. It was around future proof. It's around what are the skills that he feels as though players at this moment in time could do better at, and actually, you know, in terms of where the game's going, what are the skills and the behaviours that people are going to need for the game of the future? And let's actually let's get that across the game. This needs to be a game-wide thing. You're absolutely right. I do think it's got real good traction, and I'm not surprised it's got good traction because it's really good. I think it's really meaningful. I think it's really helpful. I think it's helped shape environments, helped shape coaching practice and coaching philosophies. And I think everybody should be really, really proud of it, both from a development department to the performance department, and at the top as well. And again, Eddie, who's taken over from Stuart, is very aware. He's really, really supportive. He might use slightly different language now at the very top. However, there's a real strong connection and correlation between that. He would be really grateful around having more players who have more of the card skills. So creativity, awareness, resilience, decision-making and self-organising. If you have players that are demonstrating those skills in abundance, then you've got a much better chance of winning games of rugby. And from a development point of view, if that's the environment and the experience the kids are having, you're going to have more players.
I mean, and I'd probably throw some shouts out as well to other contributors. Rick Shuttleworth, obviously, he's a good friend of the show, and he's been on the show a couple of times. Obviously was playing an important part in that. Kevin Bowring as well was leading and driving, some of that work. Scott Drawer as well, pulling people together, doing the cat herding. He was pretty legendary as far as some of that's concerned. So yeah, I mean, it was there was a good team of people, wasn't there, that were trying to lead and drive that. Now, let's just talk about cards for a second, because I know obviously you guys have your challenge cards and they're focused on that concept. But before we jump into the specifics of the challenge cards, methodologically, whether you're working with the 18s or you're working with children or whatever it might be, bring cards to life for me. I think for some people, it's an abstract concept that people go, yeah, I get it. Get the idea. Yeah, we want creative. We want, is it aware or adaptable?
Awareness.
See, I should remember, really. So creative, aware, resilient decision makers that can self-organize. Yes, I get that. That's what I want. But the doing of that is where people fall down. And that's why I think often people resort to methods that don't necessarily facilitate the creation of players who espouse cards. And it's mainly because they're methodologically, they don't necessarily have the ways of doing that. So talk me through that. Each of you take it in turns, I suppose, around your approach to living and breathing cards on the pitch.
Shall I start?
Yeah, you can.
Cool.
Sure.
Actually, just going back to your previous stuff, I think we should be talking more about the similarities between development and performance rather than the differences. I think we end up with the real focus on what are the differences. How is this different to this? Actually, let's talk about the similarities. With regards to cards, someone described this to me really nicely the other day. They said the problem is if you're coaching, let's say you're coaching through a game, coaches just see a merry-go-round and they can't see the signal from the noise. So I think cards gives you a really nice framework. So end in mind, lots of people who've started to think like this would say, Rusty, I'm much more relaxed. I feel like I have much more freedom, because it probably takes them away from the constraints of having to have lots of technical, tactical knowledge and coaching through correcting errors. Let's talk about creativity. Creativity, once again, I guess in our world would mean solutions to problems. So we would be, bring it to life, it would be a coach setting problems and players solving problems. And I guess it would tie in a little bit with Mark Bennett's kind of rule of three stuff. So much more coaches being better at observing, set a problem. So you've told one team you're going to defend this way. Let's have a look at the opposition, see if they've noticed the problem, see if they've then shared the information, see if they've come up with a solution. I think once people get beyond, creativity can have lots of connotations around, it's this really fancy stuff. Well, it doesn't have to be fancy stuff. It's actually just solutions to problems. So generally what I'm hearing from coaches is once they sit down, understand, take part in some development around this, then they actually find this a lot more liberating. How are we going to coach decision making? Often I observe lots of practices where there is no decision making. So actually simply giving players the opportunity to make decisions, talking about, how would you make a better decision? What's the stuff you were noticing? What were you seeing? Tends to be much more liberating for coaches than I have to put my fingers here and my thumb here and I have to point my hands here, and you just end up looking at lots and lots of detail that's irrelevant. So I'd see lots of people coaching in our world, let's say catch pass rugby against no one. Well, you're not practicing when to pass, and the best players know when to pass. They understand the decision on when to pass. So I think it can be quite liberating for coaches. I guess we would have people that would say, well, it's pink and fluffy, and then I would simply ask, well, I don't mind. I'm not emotional about what it is you're coaching people. However, what is your version of cards? So if you're in a school and it's, how are you doing grit or resilience or whatever it is you say on your website? So we would probably make them more aware of what each of the skills are, and then we would just explore the how skills. How could you coach decision making? How could you help support people with resilience? What are you thinking?
Yeah, similar really. I like the word framework. I think it's given coaches a real good framework. I don't think you can talk about the card skills without also talking about principles of play. So our sport has principles of our sport. I would urge all coaches to better understand that. How can you coach teams through principles? Cards would sit alongside that. They're just priority skills. There's clearly other stuff. I mean, if coaches see them as, at this moment in time, these are the most important skills. There's clearly other things, but that's what it would be. That's going to give the coach a framework. I do see coaches less stressed about coaching because they're moved away from the detail around technical and tactical, and they're coaching these skills. What they also do as well, obviously, is they need to model these behaviours. So if you're trying to coach creativity or you're trying to coach self-organising, then you do need to model that. You actually need to bring those skills into your coaching and probably into your life as well. So that's how I see it. I think it's had good traction. I think if we're not careful, worst case scenarios, you'd see a coach run around on a game and just shouting the words without a real deep meaning of the why. Why has the game of rugby union decided that these are really important skills? And then how am I going to coach them? And part of that would be that you've got to live them. You've got to model that. And clearly what the RFU are trying to do is to support people through coaching these card skills. And so there's a CPD specifically about how we coach these card skills. And again, I'll just come back to where I started. People need to be more aware of the principles of play within our sport, within rugby union. And I know there's similar principles within other sports, the team sports especially. Hockey and football have very similar principles. So that's it from me, really.
So, from my understanding, the links to the principles of play, if you like, then what you're doing is by understanding those principles of play, you're using those as the basis by which to create the problems that the players would want to solve. So, in my mind, for example, an invasion sport like rugby involves players seeking means by which to penetrate a defensive line. And so within that context, what you'd say is there's a principle there around essentially, I know that in rugby they talk a lot about going forward or gaining territory going forward. So therefore, you'd explore that principle of how we can go forward in a given context, and then create an environment where the players can explore the options available to them to gain the territory. Is that an example, sort of quite practical example of of the way in which you might create that problem for the players to solve?
yes, would be and absolutely that's what it is. You would start with principles. So our principles of attack, transition, defense, set piece. The environment would then pose some opportunities to players, and then cards would sit around that. So then finding out the answers and using the card skills would be a part of that, and then those demonstrating those card skills moving forward.
Yeah, I was thinking about, so go forward would be the classic. So go forward and support. How can we use support to help us go forward? Lots of coaches would already have a model in their brain of, irrespective of the picture in front of them, irrespective of the players in the team and what their strengths are, this is how we're going to go forward. Whereas the reality is it's completely context specific. So actually, based upon this picture in front, where's the best place to go forward? How are we going to do it? And one of the reasons why cards is really important is we would want players that could solve that picture in a multitude of ways. So actually, cool, you've done it this way, let's replay it. Let's see if you can solve that problem in a different way. Let's see if you can solve that problem where you've got to kick twice this time, or whatever it might be. But ultimately, we want really adaptable, skillful players so we can go forward. And we would just want them to fill in the blanks, as opposed to, certainly how I was coached for a lot of my career would be, here's the answer, just go and do it. That's where you need to be. You then go to there. Are we going to talk about the defence at any stage?
Are you, as a matter of interest, actually, on that subject? So, obviously, for players to make decisions and for them to be adaptable and skillful, one of the things they need to have is awareness. And I think this is an area that I'm placing an increasing focus on, because I feel like, because often the young players I work with, particularly in talent systems, tend to come from environments, and I am generalizing, but just for the purposes of the discussion anyway, tend to come from environments that are quite structured and quite formulaic and quite technique driven. And so therefore, basically, it's right, you're going to learn these techniques because we have a way of playing, going back to your point, Rusty, which is irrespective of context, irrespective of opposition, irrespective of the individual playing capabilities. So we have a way of playing, and we have a tactical approach that we're going to be slaves to, and basically you're going to fit into that model. So we develop your technical capability to be able to essentially repeat certain movement patterns over and over again in order to achieve that particular, whatever that tactical approach or whatever it might be. And that's the starting point. So when they come to me and I have an environment which is far more exploratory and far more about, right, here's a problem to solve, then they haven't got the skills of being able to solve problems. And one of the fundamental skills is awareness. So because previously it's about, mechanistically repeating movement patterns in any given context, what they're now doing is they're just basically, I'm asking them to say, wait, well, there's loads of options here. What you need to do is to decide what you need to do. And the way for you to decide that is for you to have an awareness of what's going on around you, which will then determine what your course of action might be. And they find that such a difficult concept to grasp. Two reasons. One, it's not pre-prescribed, and so therefore they're not picking from a box of movements that they've already been given. And secondly, they haven't got any way of learning to be aware. So there's that kind of learning of how to be aware is actually a big part of what I'm trying to focus on at the moment. I just wonder if you've had similar experiences.
I'm going to let Fletch answer this, but I know what his first line is. Awareness. It's just information.
Yeah, I mean, awareness is just if you reframe it, awareness is information.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, what you're talking about is that for these types of players, if they've been in that type of environment, the information that they've been receiving through the experiences that you've talked about is just not that helpful, because that's not what the game looks like. Fundamentally, the game is not. It's not that systematic. It's not that structured. It's not that organised. And that's actually the discussions that I get into. So for players who have been in that type of environment, you're not preparing them to play the game because it doesn't look anything like the game, or certainly not often. But yeah, I think if you reframe awareness to information and just understand and accept that some young people are in an environment where the information that they've been receiving in lots of different ways, hopefully lots of it through playing or doing some form of training, it's just not that helpful. And what we would clearly do in our environment, what we would encourage other coaches to do is to make players more aware by actually giving them the awareness or the information that what the game is going to be. I mean, how can you prepare people to play the game if your training doesn't look anything like the game? And that's fundamentally what a good environment would look like. It would look like the game.
Yeah, I'm thinking about John O'Connor last night. So John O'Connor hosted last night, and the best man speech I've ever heard to open it up. I wanted to give him a standing ovation. One of the things he said that really resonated, that I'm starting to hear from coaches is, and I won't swear, so I'll keep it clean. He said pretty much, we're all standing there in the middle, feeling really scared, and we need to pretend like we know what's going on. So actually, I think it's this leap for coaches into, right, I'm comfortable now that I see engagement, enjoyment, fun from the kids, playing games. They are loving it. I now need to upskill myself in being able to coach within the game. And I'm starting to hear lots of coaches talk about that. And so that would be why our emphasis is exactly on those skills. And I thought of this because earlier that day I'd been coaching and I'd played a game where it was a point if you scored a try. It was 5 points if you kicked into one of the kicking zones, because most kids have been banned from kicking since the age of about 8. and then I just said, look, but it's 10 points. So each team would decide within each section you're going to defend in a certain way. It was 10 points if I, as a coach, saw you work out how they're defending. This is on the fly, so not without stoppages. Come up with a solution and exploit it. So actually, we suddenly then had kids going, they're defending like this, we need to do this. And I was like, why have I never done that as a coach? I mean, and that was so simple. Another practical example I was thinking of yesterday. So once again, lots of the kids have never kicked. So I stopped the game, everyone in attack look at me so they can't see the defence. I was like, okay, well, where do you think the fullback is? So for me, if you've got a kicking game, where the fullback stands is clearly important. I said, cool, put your hand up if you think he's on the left-hand side of the post. Put your hand up if you think he's in the middle, if you think he's on the right. 2 people got it right. I then asked, who's playing at fullback? And it's one of their teammates. No one knew who was playing at fullback. So it's our job as a coach to actually make them aware, help support them, help scaffold them with what are the cues you might be looking for. So one of the really nice pieces of work I think we did in the pathway was sit down with guys like Danny Kerr and Marcus Smith and just get them to talk through clips. So, Marcus, tell me how this has happened. What are you looking for? So Marcus might say, well, I'm actually looking for who's on the end. I'm looking for where the 9 and 15 are, and I'm looking in front of me to see if defenders are excited. Because if they're excited, I know they're going to come at me and it's going to... So actually, how can we help scaffold kids in what to look for in the merry-go-round? So it's often a merry-go-round for the coaches. It's often a merry-go-round for some of the kids. And then the other challenges, and we had this last night again with, well, if it's a merry-go-round and I'm not really sure what to do, then I'm just going to go and stand on the wing. And so how are we going to be better at supporting individuals within this as well? So let's support coaches with that as well. Because actually, if you go and spend a year, 2-3 years on the wing, well, no surprise, the guys with 9 and 10 on their back are going to be more skillful than you and have better awareness. And so, yeah, it's something that's really on my mind at the moment. This is actually how do we scaffold the kids with this process? And of course, that's coaching, isn't it? And I don't want to be. It's always that balance between, whatever. We end up with most of our debates are around language, like structure, framework, shape, unstructured, that kind of language. I think we were probably in agreement that the game has structured and unstructured elements in our sport and other sports. So we're now doing stuff with hockey. By what it looks like to me, there's some structured parts of hockey and there's some unstructured. But let's make sure we're training appropriately. So there's no point doing all your sessions at 100% structured when the game is about 70%.
So in that scenario, I mean, there's so much. That's such a rich set of answers. There's so many places I could go. In terms of when you're talking about the players becoming attuned to, I mean, this is something that Keith David said to me a few months ago when I was over in Ireland at the Movement Skill Acquisition Conference, and he was talking about he doesn't really like the term skill acquisition because the assumption there is, you know, skill is something that you acquire and then therefore you always have it, and it's a thing and it's fixed, and that in itself conjures up images of skill being a kind of like a finite concept. And what he's saying is skill isn't something that it is a finite concept. Skill is contextually defined and is ever changing. And so he talks about a phrase called skill attunement. So what he's saying is that his emphasis, or the emphasis, should be on players becoming more attuned to the various information sources that are out there. And when I was speaking to Andrew Wilson the other day about this, he was sort of saying about how the difference between, you know, kind of information and affordances, and the point being is that the game is giving off information all the time. What the difference though is whether we become attuned to the various things that information can afford us. So how can we utilize moments in time and space where we can take advantage of, but in order to take advantage of that, we need to be attuned to how that picture is shaping. And this is why I'm so passionate about this for young people, which is I feel like if we spend all our time focused on technique, or as much of the time as we do on technique, then, and that's not to say that technique isn't important, but I'm just saying if the focus is on technique, then what we're not doing is we're essentially saying to children that you must learn these movements, otherwise you can't do the next thing. But actually what they then don't do is they don't get the opportunities to see the pictures. So they're not attuned. It's actually taking them away from being attuned to the information sources, because their focus becomes on movement. It doesn't become focused on movement based on what I can see in this picture. So they're not connecting those two things together. And so therefore, from my perspective, I feel like our opportunity in terms of the problem-solving concept is to give children lots of opportunities to see moments in time and space and to begin to understand what that allows them to be able to do and what it might not be able to do. I'd just be interested to get your thoughts on that concept that I've been wrestling with in the past few days.
Again, the simple answer is yes. I mean, that is exactly what you would, or not exactly, but that is part of the experience that you want the players to have. We would want coaches to have the skills to coach players in the game of rugby. And that's kind of the crux of it. I mean, there is one concept that that we need to talk about, and it's probably in its simplistic terms, but it is scanning. It's searching for information. I think we need to talk a little bit sort of coaches speak rather than academic-y type speak. I think basically awareness is information. Scanning is a key part of that. We need to search for information. Our role as coaches is to create environments where that information is helpful and useful, i.e. it looks and feels like the game. It is the game always. And if anything, it's, I think, where we as a sport and people who are working in this space need to be, is to support coaches in their skills to be able to support the players. So the how skills of coaching is, I think, the area certainly that rugby needs to concentrate a lot more on. We need to get on the grass with each other. With definitely experts like Rick Shuttleworth, so he can better provide the evidence and the information and the science behind it. But then we need to get support coaches and having better skills as coaches to try and draw this out of players. But it's absolutely what you were talking about there.
Yeah, I mean, I always think of it like this. So if you see a coach still on the sideline shouting, screaming, Why didn't you see that? Why didn't you do that? It's pretty good feedback on what your practice looks like. I really enjoyed your podcast with Andrew. I listened to it twice because there were so many long words, and it reinforced my thought we need more translators for academics. I was going, what's the difference between information and affordances again, as I was cycling up the hill in Spain trying to get fit. But I did enjoy his quotes that transfer is spectacularly context specific. I think we need to be mindful of that. And, same as what Fletch said, I think Tabai Matson came over and a real impact at Bath. He would talk about landmarks. So actually, what are the landmarks you might be looking for in certain situations that might help you with your decision making? But once again, there may be multiple solutions. And me and Fletch playing together might be different to me and Stuart playing together because Stuart can do this and Fletch can't do this, or vice versa. So also a lot of emphasis in our world would be around combinations. How are you going to work together? How are we going to bring people's strengths to life within all this stuff as well? And it never fails. So real aware. One of the so once again coaching yesterday. First of all, start off, just tell one team, look, 2 defenders walk. I'm not going to tell the opposition. Have a look, see who notices it. No one ever notices it unless you tell them and go, 2 of their players are walking. I then said, look, 2 players are walking. You've got to pick who they are. I told the whole team to walk. They said it was definitely these 2. And was it anyone else? No, it was just those 2. Would it surprise you if the whole team was walking? Yes. We then did a really interesting one with, so they were going to defend. So in rugby, like a blitz would be going up really hard, and like something like a drift would be a bit, not as aggressive. So they defended in a drift, but they called blitz. So we did this for about 6 minutes, and this was the game where 10 points if you exploit. And the attack were convinced, they're blitzing. How are they defending? They're blitzing. This is what we're going to do. And, for a whole team to have drifted for 5 minutes and no one in the opposition to have seen it, really kind of brought home to them how little people actually look for information. And then I said, how do you know they were blitzing? Oh, we heard them saying it. So that would be, let's take the first piece of information, the really easiest bit of information, put it in our brains and convince ourselves we're right. Then it becomes really efficient for the brain to work, doesn't it? To have to do that much thinking. But that just would be quite typical. So once again, think about the stuff you're doing in your coaching that might be preventing, developing awareness.
Yes, just do it. And just before you interject, just on that, I think that is if there is a golden fleece or a holy grail, I think that is it in coaching. So there's a little bit around support.
That's your silver bullet, is it?
That's
You've called
bullet.
it. Nice.
Yeah, I've just called the silver bullet. If there was a silver bullet.
You just said there is.
I think it is around that tactical. We would call it, in a shout-out to Newcastle Falcons, James Ponton, around beat the game. So the language around beat the game is something also. So I think there's some support of coaches around how can you facilitate through games. So the how skills in that is a big area that we need to focus and look to support coaches on. And in addition to that, it would be the tactical element of our sport. So I think the strategic stuff is done fine. Certainly all the way through. I don't see there's any significant.
I think most
dramas.
coaches have got strategy covered, haven't they?
Yeah,
they've got game plan done.
Game plan tick. I actually do think in lots of areas we have adaptable players. They're playing a lot of skill games. They would be able to be solving problems individually or in little small groups. I think it's the collective awareness around, well, what is this game sort of allowing us to do? What's going well and what's not going so well. It can be called tactical. We prefer to be called beat the game. That is also the area that I think as coaches and as a sport and as an environment, we need some support around. There's lots of stuff going on. I think we can do it significantly better. I think the kids really enjoy it. I think they're actually really good at it. If you look at the gaming world, lots of kids would be solving lots of problems within the context of sitting in their room playing on a console. Lots of them is about levels and scenarios and cheats and fines and bonus points. Young people tend to be pretty good at it. I just don't think they're used to it in sport. It's not something that they would associate with sport. Would be the solving problem type stuff. Lots of the times, the answers are given to them. The perception of the environment of the coach is that it looks like this. So they're the areas I think, and certainly through Magic Academy, that's what we want to support. We want to support the how skills of the coach. How can you facilitate learning? Lots of it through games type activity, and then also the beat the game stuff. Because what sits either side of that, strategy before and adaptability behind it, we actually think that's done pretty well.
I was just thinking of, I know once again, it's a small world, but Amy Price's podcast really resonated with me.
Yeah.
I contacted Amy and she did a conference up in Birmingham, calling it a conference. It was just a gathering of people in a building. And I was fortunate enough to be coached by Amy. So we played this football game. Oh my God, I was so into it. I was like, and to be honest, I don't think computers were invented when I was young. Or it just took too long to load up Harrier Attack. And so, but it was like you could get a superpower if you picked up the headband, and when you put it on, you could do this. And I'm like, and it was really interesting because then they had so I really like her concept around the Doll Fishbowl. So we have this space where players make once again, we're developing awareness, but a decision, actually, I need to go and practice something in this area, as opposed to, you're not very good at this, come out. And the game was so good, no one wanted to go into the practice area. Yeah. So they certainly had to make the practice area a bit more sexy and exciting to entice people into it. But actually the game was unbelievable. And I once again, asked the question last night, put your hand up if you used to be a kid. Mm-hmm. We often forget what it was like to be a kid. And probably for about an hour on a pitch at Birmingham Uni under Amy Price's supervision is probably the most childlike I've felt in a while. So I think we need to understand, exactly what you said, their world. Yeah. What does it feel like? What's it that's exciting them? What's getting them engaged in learning?
Yeah, I mean, an example, I think there's lots of parents growing up shouting to kids about being on Fortnite. I think, why are they on Fortnite or why are they on similar games? Because they're exciting. There's a challenge. There's a real strong tactical part of it. It's about connecting. So they're often playing with other people as well. We need to bring, and we're currently doing it, a bit of a shout out for Magic Academy. That's what we're doing around our skill games. We're trying to, and Amy has been a big influence on this. So we've got some exciting ideas around how we're going to gamify sport, because that's actually what the game. And now the byproduct of that is that you will get people who are tactically very aware. They have a beat the game mindset and a mentality, and that is what's needed. I think Eddie Stewart, lots of performance coaches around would say the reason that they structure and organise people is because they're not capable of working stuff out. I would challenge that. However, I think also we can do that better. We can do the tactical stuff. Again, it probably hasn't been done because it can look a bit messy. Sometimes you don't all find the answers. You don't find them at different times. There'll be lots of stuff that doesn't go well. But again, they're going to be big focuses for Magic Academy. Again, how skills, how can we support the players?
That mindset's been something interesting. So I've been coaching quite a bit this week and in some awesome environments. Actually, expectations of kids, interestingly, they're about to get their GCSE results today, and they all want 100%. So actually, if training isn't 100%, and often feel this with coaches as well, then, and it's usually 100% in attack, unless you call it a defence session, then it needs to be 100% in defence. Then people are a little bit sad. Whereas actually reframe it, it just wouldn't work in school if you got 100% in every test. You just wouldn't be learning stuff. So actually, I think that reframe is quite important for kids, given the way society is at the moment. They're all going to get their exam results today. They're going to be compared to their peers. Their school's then going to be put on a league table that says which schools are the best, which ones are closest to 100%. I think we need to reframe that and think of a little bit more about the messiness and the non-linearity of learning. So that's been something I've probably been toying a bit with coaches as well, is actually reframing that for them.
Is that a word? Linearity?
I just wanted to use a posh word.
Wow.
Non-linear. I've heard Stuart use it. I thought, I'll get it in the mix.
It's cool words.
Non-linear.
I'm going to add it to my book.
I think the point you make, though, is an interesting one. That culturally, I think we've sort of been led to this quite a lot around kind of education systems and how our education system reflects some of the things that we value, and the things that we value in particularly in industry is hard work, kind of commitment, and but within industry, we had for a long time we had an industrial complex that required, or at least the management thinking was that it required people not to think, literally just to repeat, just to become a function of a machine where people repeat things. Well, the problem we've got is that our economy and actually our world is changed now, where we have an information economy or an information kind of revolution going on, where actually creative endeavors are what we're looking for. So creativity is at a premium now. People who in a workplace are able to solve problems using critical thinking skills, awareness of potential solutions, and all that. And some of our greatest technological creations have come from those moments of almost like creativity. But our education system is designed really to kind of not really to foster creativity, and it's designed predominantly, and I know I'm generalizing again, but predominantly to get people to kind of memorize facts, really, in order to or to be able to follow process and procedure in order to then get them to the next stage of education and what have you. And my point about this is that sports followed that. In fact, coach education, in my opinion, followed that very, very closely. It was about competence. It was about qualification and achieving a level of qualification that says that you are deemed to be at a certain level of competence. And the competence was very, very prescribed. It was not contextualized whatsoever. The skill of the individual to engage was not part of that. It was about very, very technical competence. Did you question all these stuff? And I've been an assessor. I know I've been there with the tick board, the clipboard, and the tick box. Tick board, there's a new idea. Anyway, but my point is trying to make is that we've lost sight of the fact that what's important to us and what will be important to us in the future is people who are capable of solving problems and being creative. But what we're not giving individuals the skills to do so. We're not even giving them the environment in which they're actively asked to do so. And so as a result, it's no surprise, is it, that the likes of Stuart Lancaster and Eddie Jones say, I can't ask these players to make decisions because they're not capable of making decisions. Well, they've never been given opportunities to do so. Having said that, I think they have, and I do think there's more scope for that, but that's a different... I'm with you, Fletcher.
I think that, we chatted about earlier, there's definitely a tide. I do a bit of stuff for Google. Creativity, most firms are saying it's definitely rising in terms of the skills needed because the computers are coming. So interestingly, Kirk, head of creativity at Google, said lots of people are pushing their kids into schools to learn to code. He said, the machines are going to be able to code soon.
Yeah. I
thought that's good because my son doesn't code, so he'll be okay. But yeah, think about this. What are and exactly what cards is. It's what does the game of the future look like? How can we support young people with that? Same, that's what schools should be thinking. What does the world of the future look like? How are we supporting them? And that might be sitting in rows, listening to someone at the front of the classroom, telling them some facts. Because actually, at some stage, you need some facts to connect stuff up and come up with some fresh thinking. However, I think it's a little bit heavily weighted towards that. So, we would spend a lot of time asking our kids and kids that we coach, what's your day been like? What's the best question you've asked? Tell me about your lesson. What's been the most exciting bit? And I'm generally disappointed, if I'm honest. I might have said this on my last podcast. One of the most powerful things I did when I taught was spend a day with a kid. And I asked teachers that, have you done the day with the kid thing? And they say yes, and I said, how did you feel? What was it like? And they all say the same 6-letter word: They all say it was boring. Birmingham, last thing I did, and then she'll Fletcher have some thoughts on this. I was with Birmingham City the other day, and they said to me, what would make the best first day at work ever for you? And I said, well, this and this, and I'd love it if this happened, and I could go on the first team pitch and take a penalty and all this type of stuff. And I said, why is that? And they said, well, that's what we want to do. We want to make everyone's first day the best first day ever. We're not going to prompt them towards it, but at the end of the day, we would love them to say it was unprompted. Do you know what? That was the best first day I've ever had. I think more coaches and teachers should think like that. Like every day is the best first day. Final shout out to your podcast that I've enjoyed. And I can't remember his name, but the guy it was the exercise clubs in the park. And he talked about the
Barricore.
Oh mate, I was loving it. Like the showman type thing. That's the craft of coaching. It's not just the house. Some of the house skills are around engagement and inspiring, and the kids are thinking, I can't wait to come back. Bristol DPP, I'm going to let you speak at some stage. Bristol DPP, without doubt, is the hour and a half of the week where my son and his friends come to life the most. I can try jokes, I can try dad dancing, it's not working. They are in the car on the way home. His friends who are normally quiet, I cannot shut them up. And I'm looking at it going, these coaches will get jobs in the park company. What was the park company called again?
Our Parks.
Our Parks.
Cool concept.
Brilliant concept.
Yeah, no, I think, with education, there was some information sent me recently around the World Economic Forum type stuff in terms of what the employable skills of the future. And to be fair, they are talking about creativity. They're talking about critical thinking. They're talking about the ability to have meaningful relationship type stuff. So I do think the information is out there. I do think, to be fair, in lots of areas, education are aware of it, possibly hamstrung a little bit by some stuff around curriculum and, in sort of perception of parency type stuff, which is probably for another podcast. I do think people are aware of it. I am excited that they're the words of that I'm hearing, from my body. If you want to be employed in the future, critical thinking, creativity, relationships, and others are the most meaningful stuff. And again, both education and other environments are going to need to look at that. How are they actually supporting young people in developing those skills? Because that's actually what's going to be helpful and useful. And certainly, again, Magic Academy and our general philosophy would be absolutely that. We want people to be solving problems themselves, as an example.
So, obviously, on that subject, you talked about beat the game, and you've talked about, opportunities for creativity. And, you guys have spent a lot of time, I think, kind of pouring your brains out. And as a result, you've created this new product, which is, by the looks of things, you're going to sell out very quick. I hope you got a great big container load of them in. So talk me through the challenge cards, what's on them.
The Stig sold all that. We've done none of that. We've done no organisation whatsoever. Although, did you take them to the post office?
I took them to the post office.
Oh, well done.
To be fair.
Well done.
So talk me through what's on the challenge cards. What's the thinking behind them? How can coaches use them? This, that, and the other.
Yeah, look, they came around, and they're not necessarily a new concept. I think people challenging each other is clearly what's been going on for forever. What Rusty did when he came and started working for the RFU, he basically did the challenge cards. He used to come into our environment. He would have some conversations before, really understand. This is pretty much from a management point of view. What's the stuff you want to get better at? What's your super strengths? Really pushes around our development planning type stuff. So what's the stuff that we're currently working on? How can we bring it to life? And often when we were together, he would then present you with a card which would have some challenges on, and that would definitely support both the things you want to get better at and your strengths. And it would make me aware that there's going to be lots and lots of things that are going to be happening over this next 2, 3, 5 days. However, in addition to that, I'm going to have a bit more focus around this stuff, and it had really big impact. I definitely goofed up a number of times. So he would set me some challenges. I thought I'd do really well on them. I didn't do as well as I thought. And it just resonated really well. We then shifted that into coaching, so we would do it with players in our environment in a number of ways. It wasn't just a card, but we would set individual challenges within team context. One of the problems, well, not problems, but if you're not mindful of it, you can't just do a good team session. And actually, the individuals would have, there would be different levels of, some players would get quite a lot out of that session and other players wouldn't get quite as much. So to individualize a team sport is actually really, really important. A challenge type environment, and challenge cards could be part of that, is really, really important. You probably would say, I would say this, I think they're going to have significant impact. I think if nothing else, it's going to make people really aware of certain parts of the games or certain parts of their development. That's going to be helpful, because that's certainly what it did for me. It had a big impact on me as a person. We're hoping it's going to have similar impacts, both from a coaching and a parent and when people are involved in the environment, and also obviously mainly the players as well. We would have a lot of success around setting players challenges in team sessions. And their learning would be accelerated.
Awesome.
I love the word awesome.
Is goofed the first time someone said the word goofed on a podcast ever in history?
It's definitely the first time anybody has ever responded to my rambling as awesome.
Well, the reason I say it's awesome is because, like you say, I think often there's a lot of this, what you might call, there's a lot of this wisdom out there, and certainly within the academy and within kind of Twitter sphere, I suppose, lots of people are sharing lots and lots of different ideas, and I think the wisdom of crowds is something that's particularly valuable here. But the very fact that what you guys have done is kind of distill that and go, right, let's take all the stuff we do or we've thought of in the past that have helped us work with us, and then to sort of package that together and spend the time doing that, because I know how hard that is, and then actually put it out there for others to say, look, here's some stuff that's helped us. This might help you. I think it's a fantastic thing, and less people, more. And I know that piece of work was in development way before. You guys were doing that anyway as part of your day-to-day work supporting other coaches within the rugby context. This is before Magic Academy became as formalised as it did. So that's just a kind of almost what was a pet project has now become, something else that people are able to access. And I think it's valuable. And my point is that, and I just think more people in the coaching community need to do more of that, because then we'd all help each other to get better. I actually feel that there's an awful lot of people out there who are quite proprietorial about these ideas. And, they're almost like, this is mine and I'm going to keep it to myself because it gives me my performance edge. And I just think, if we could share more, I think we'd all benefit.
Yeah, my observations are certainly below academy level, and including the academy. That's become the norm in our sport, that lots of people would share lots of stuff, get into each other's environments, go, take 2 or 3 guys from different academies and go. So we did Birmingham City again, did a brunch the other day, Central Birmingham. What are the implications of the World Cup for coaching? And they had Powley there from cricket, they had me, they had 2 guys from Worcester Warriors, and they had guys from football teams. And that's where I see the future coach development. Go back to the challenge cards. Probably 2 things I think that make them nice is, one is, it doesn't give you the solution. It gives you almost like a problem. So give feedback in 3 different ways. Actually, you can then fill in the blanks, and you might need some scaffolding for that. And then it allows you to be authentic. So don't want anyone to coach like Rusty, God forbid. I want people to coach and be themselves. So I think one of the challenges we've spoken about previously is people will go see something, go and copy it in their own environment without understanding how to translate it into their context. So being authentic, being yourself, understanding what your story is, why you coach, how you coach, how are you going to help support the people in getting better is important. So the cards just give you a bit of freedom. Probably the final thing they actually do is it's just a bit less invasive to actually, rather than me go, look, so-and-so, you talk too much. any danger. It might be that, coaches pick for each other or they select one they're going to try. So it might be, I'm actually going to select the one. I'm going to try and do a session with no huddles because actually I do talk too much. It's just a bit less invasive. I think one of the things I keep coming across again and again in coaching is people are struggling with those critical conversations, often because of hierarchy, often because, well, he's the head coach or he's tier 2 management or whatever the level might be. So I've been doing, I think that they help support that stuff as well.
I do think they're playful and they're fun. So,
that's what I meant.
So they, but people are going to have a lot of fun exploring these challenge cards, and then clearly what's going to happen is they're going to come up with some other stuff as well, and they're going to come up with some way cooler stuff than probably what me, Rusty, and the Magic Stig came up with, which is also exciting. So, and this concept will grow. I'm unsure where it's going to go. We actually had some other stuff that we were doing in the under 18s that we will look to share as well. And yeah, my experience of using the challenge cards in a number of environments is it's playful, it's fun, and I possibly even a byproduct is that you accelerate learning. People are trying stuff, they're exploring stuff, they're coming up with stuff, and it's helpful.
I like the concept specifically because we're taking the very suggestion of the approach we want to take with players, which is to kind of learn and explore through problems to solve and challenges and being playful, and we're applying that to coach development, because for me so much coach development is so formal very often. There's lots of PowerPoint and there's actually quite a lot of formal and structure, so actually taking a playful approach to coach development is so great.
If you buy 2 sets of cards, you will get a free coach development clipboard.
Has it got tick boxes on it?
There's an incentive as well. You get a red pen with it.
Guys, listen, I've loved having this conversation. As always, I know we could talk for a lot longer. Sadly, I'm constrained by other conversations I need to have with other people. As a starting point, though, it'd be great to just how do people get in touch if they're not already? How could they be part of the Magic Academy if they want to? And where can they get hold of challenge cards or indeed you guys?
Look, it's relatively straightforward. There's some stuff around social media, so...
here we go. You don't know how to explain Twitter, do you?
Hashtag?
It's not a hashtag.
Yeah, okay, go on.
It's like that. It's like a Twitter handle.
At the Magic Acad is, so you can follow us on the
ACAD, the Magic ACAD.
The Magic ACAD. From a website point of view, which is where the area where you can purchase or you can explore some stuff, and the challenge cards are on there, is themagicacademy.co.uk. Thanks.
And then emails you, you can...
Yeah, just email Fletch at themagicacademy.co.uk, or Rusty would be the same. So anything people are curious about, they want to explore some more, want to share some stuff, then just get in touch, and let's start supporting coaches to give kids a better experience.
Fantastic. Okay. I know you'll be. I know a lot of people will be interested in finding out more about the stuff that you're doing and what have you. I entirely concur with having been a member of the Magic Academy and seeing the kind of vibrant conversations that take place in there. I highly recommend that as well as a source of learning. Guys, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk about some of these ideas and all that sort of stuff. And all power to you. Keep on going. I'm really excited to see the things that you guys are going to do in the next few months and years, because I think, as you're probably finding out since you sort of made this step, I suppose, that the opportunities and the scope and actually the demand for support like this is pretty high. So I don't think there's not going to be any shortage of people looking for your help. And yeah, it's going to be really exciting maybe to check in 6 months or so's time and just to see where we've got to and what sort of exciting things you're doing.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, cheers, dude. Always good to chat.
Thanks a lot.
No, he's behind you in the room.
There he is again. Look, he's there. Good stuff.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.
Wow, that was a fantastic discussion with those two guys. Always interesting, always challenging. Rusty, Fletch, really appreciate you coming on, and really excited to hear how you're taking things forward, how the Magic Academy is growing with the combined support of the Magic Stig. Really need to find out who that is. And I love the approach you're taking to bringing your philosophy out there to others and sharing the philosophy, not just in the rugby context, but also in a whole range of different sports. I love this idea of playful coach development. It's something I've taken away from that, the idea of let's actually gamify our coach development experiences and use that as a means by which we can challenge ourselves to learn and develop. Really love that whole idea. Fletch and I are both speaking in a few weeks' time with the support and alongside the guys from Coach Logic. We've got an event up at the Welford Road, the Leicester Tigers, home of Leicester Tigers. So we'll be up there talking about all things coaching, not just rugby. So if you want to check that out, probably go to the Coach Logic website and you'll be able to find out all the details there and come and have a chat with us. In the meantime, as always, if you want to get on board and support the podcast, by all means do so. Your support will be mostly welcome. It doesn't necessarily have to be financial support. Reviews and sharing is always a good thing, telling your friends about things. But if you do want to go that extra step, then there is an opportunity through the Patreon on the website where you can become a supporter for as little as the cost of a cup of coffee. And any supporters are able to fire across some questions to me, which I will endeavour to answer either through putting your question to some of the guests or potentially through my own Ask Me Anything episodes that are going to be coming out in the near future. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed that one. We've got some interesting conversations coming up over the next few weeks, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, ditch those drills.